Amplified. So, good morning. I'm Buck Malick, Chair of the St. Croix County Zoning Board of Adjustment. Today is September 24th. The clock on the wall says it's 8:30, and this location is room 1284, the St. Croix County Government Center. Those are the data that were published for this September meeting of the Board of Adjustment, and therefore I call it to order. I live in the town of Hudson, about a mile and a half from here, and I'm what's called a citizen member of this Board of Adjustment. I'll call on the other members of the Board of Adjustment to introduce themselves.
Dave Peterson, District 15, Town of Kinnickinnick.
Joe Miller, Town of Hammond, citizen member.
Tom Spaniel, Town of St. Joseph, citizen member.
And David Nickham, Town of Baldwin, citizen member.
Very good. And we have Mike Wozniak, who will be speaking on behalf of the Community Development Department's zoning division today. So that constitutes our roll call. We have a quorum, more than a quorum even. So we're all set to go officially. We have two sets of minutes, members, from the August meeting when we met on two successive days. So we have two sets of minutes. I glanced at them. They looked okay to me. Does anybody have any changes to offer to those minutes? If so, speak up now. Nope. All right. They will be deemed approved then, in the very fashion that they were put forward to the public. At this time, I'll make a pro forma statement asking if anyone has an objection, any reason to think that this meeting was properly noticed. We have notice requirements in the statutes that pertain to boards of adjustment, and we have notices that are required for public meetings, and we are required to comply with both, of course. So the notices of this meeting should have been published in the official county newspaper a certain period of time before the meeting and a certain number of times, and put on the county's website, and then anything else is gravy. Does anybody want to make a statement for the record to indicate that they think there's been some defect in the publication of notice for this meeting? Good. I wasn't expecting it, but we ask. It's in our rules. Today we have one matter on which to conduct a public hearing, followed by a potential decision. And I'll call on Mr. Wozniak to make a presentation. After that, people who are in favor of it. After that, people who might be opposed. And after that, people who aren't necessarily for or against, but think they have a comment that would help the board to make the best possible decision. We ask that everybody, before speaking, sign our sign-in form, which is over on the wall, because at that place, as you sign in, you're taking an oath that your testimony will be true and correct. So we will not be administering oaths to witnesses afterwards. We just ask that you sign over there and do it in writing. And now for you, Mr. Wozniak.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. We have, again, on the agenda, a request from Milestone Materials, or the owner, also Matthey Construction Company, to revise or modify an existing conditional use permit for the Wilson Quarry site, a non-metallic mining conditional use permit that was most recently revised in 2017. Now the request is to change monitoring well sampling events from quarterly to annually. This site is at 32 U.S. Highway 12, involves a number of parcels in Section 36 of Town of Springfield. And Current zoning is R1 under the Chapter 15. Previously, it was in a rural residential zone under 17. We've included with the packet material the staff report, which I'll go through here, and also the conditional use application requesting the modification submitted by Milestone Materials. We have Candy Anderson here representing Milestone for the request. And there we go. Get this the right size. This request involves, at the Wilson Quarry, there's 6 groundwater monitoring wells around the perimeter of the quarry, and the purpose is to allow groundwater monitoring from the wells to be reduced from quarterly sampling to annual sampling due to the cessation of industrial sand mining, which really stopped mid-2017, June of 2017, based on market conditions. And with the requirement, though, that the sampling event frequency would be conducted quarterly, again, when and if industrial sand mining restarts at the Wilson Quarry. As you probably are familiar, this quarry's been in operation a long time, since the 1930s, with aggregate mining. The county's permitted the site since 1990, and Milestone Materials has continued to renew conditional use permit in accordance with county zoning since that time. Now, the CUP was modified in 2011 to allow mining of industrial sand to within a 5-foot buffer maintained above the groundwater table. And at that time, there was a groundwater monitoring program established for baseline groundwater data. Now, the permit was subsequently modified. Initially, I should say, there were 3 groundwater monitoring wells installed. The permit was modified based on a request in 2013, and 3 additional monitoring wells were established. And basically, the plan for the industrial sand mining included 10 phases, and Milestone has indicated that they haven't proceeded beyond the first phase of the industrial sand mining. Basically, the industrial sand mining was occurring down in this southeast quarter of the or corner of the site, with some of the ongoing aggregate operations currently further north, pretty separated, segregated from the where the industrial mine sand extraction and processing was occurring. Basically, again, down in this southeast corner here, you can actually see the face of some of the activity there. Now, the conditional use permit was, as I had previously indicated, was last revised in 2017, and there were some conditions added, including a condition that groundwater sampling continue quarterly and be reported annually for a minimum of 3 contiguous active operation years beginning in 2018, with the requirement that the sampling be increased to monthly if there is a consistent increase in any of the groundwater testing parameters. Now, shortly after that 2017 approval, the market conditions for industrial sand mining changed, and basically the industrial sand mining and processing stopped on June 14th, 2017. And with conditions not being strong enough to justify continued operation of that aspect of the mine. And on this graphic, I just note that was included in the packet, there are locations of the 6 monitoring wells identified with blue triangles. There's one location along the access road where there's a couple wells in that location, and the other 4 are located around basically the perimeter of the site. Just a little visual, these are the 2 that approximate.
Why are they so close together? Why would,
You know, I'd let Candy Anderson with Milestone maybe answer that question.
all right.
Got a
when
little
we
more
get to
history.
it.
If you'd like to come up.
Thought that was odd. And I know if I didn't ask the question, Mr. Miller would.
Hi, I'm Candy Anderson with Milestone Materials. I just wanted to also, before I answer your question, when I was putting together all of my stuff to prepare for the meeting, I did learn that we did do some washing up until November of 2017. So I just wanted to clarify that part. That was my mistake on the application. As far as the wells, I did bring Bob Service with me. He's our hydrogeologist in case I really messed this up. But in general, the reason for those 2 wells, one of them was installed in 2011 when we did our first modification to mine the industrial sand. And the second one was put in with our 2013 modification to mine into the groundwater. So one of the wells is a shallower well to be in the aquifer that we are in. The next well was designed or was put in deeper to be in the lower aquifer, and the point of those was to help establish base flow of Wilson Creek. They're nested together, they're close so that we could monitor temperature and water level on a more frequent basis.
Which one, what's the name of the
Sure.
deep one here in this picture?
Those 2 are monitoring wells 3A and 3B, and I will tell you which one is which.
Well, that's fine, okay.
So this would be 3B, I believe, and that would be 3A. They're very close together. And that
Thanks a
was
lot.
by
Okay.
design. Yep.
I just note also, if there are any other questions, also have Kevin Graybo, who's been involved on the staff end for much longer than I have on, and is very familiar with the site, and also Tamara Traxler, who, if there's, especially on any water monitoring, water management issues, is our staff expert on those matters. Again, I'd continue that the quarterly monitoring results to date do not reveal any, or have not revealed any significant trends that would cause any exceeding of the parameters that would justify, going from or preclude, I should say, reducing from quarterly to annual with the lack of industrial sand mining activity. And frankly, there isn't any other aggregate activity that's extending into groundwater either. As I had indicated, the aggregate area that material would be taken from is further north on the site, and very much separated from the area where the industrial sand mining was going into the groundwater. I'd note that in terms of agency review, this was referred to the Wisconsin DNR. and they indicated that they weren't able to review zoning-related applications that contain requirements outside of DNR permit authority, and that was on August 12th, 2020. Also, the application was referred to the town of Springfield, and I believe the applicant attended a town board meeting. And the town board conveyed meeting minutes that reflected that they acted to recommend approval of the CUP amendment at their 9/14/2020 meeting. You know, your options, as usual, are to approve, deny, or table postponed the decision to absorb information gathered or request additional information. And of course, you would need to stipulate findings to support your decision, as is customary for all your actions. We have a series of findings of fact and conclusions of law that were included in the staff report. Much of this material is redundant to the information I just went through in the action requested part of the presentation. So I'm not going to run through all of it in detail, but let me just run down to couple points I would make, and that is, let's just move a little further through this. I'd note number 9 and 10, that first 9, Milestone Materials has been collecting groundwater data from 2011 through June 2020 at the Wilson Quarry, and has met the requirements of the conditions of the CUP to report the data to the county annually, providing almost 9 years of background groundwater quality data. And on finding number 10, that the monitoring results to date, again, do not reveal any significant trends in groundwater monitoring parameters that would preclude this reduction in sampling frequency from quarterly to annually. Aside from historically sporadic NR 140 enforcement standard exceedances for nitrates in one of the wells, no other monitoring parameters have been detected above NR 140 standards in the Wilson Quarry well network. And I would just carry on here with finding number 14, just to indicate the criteria for considering the CUP. The proposed change from the quarterly to annual monitoring, staff believes complies with all applicable standards of the R1 zone, the development standards, and any applicable use regulations in Chapter 15. We would also offer to you that the proposed change from quarterly to annual monitoring conforms to standards in Section 14.2A8, and therefore would not be contrary to public health, safety, and general welfare. That would be from the county's mining regulations. And also that the proposed change in monitoring frequency would not adversely affect property values in the neighborhood affected. And lastly, that under paragraph D, that groundwater monitoring shall be conducted annually and reported annually as a condition until such time as industrial sand production restarts, at which time groundwater monitoring will be conducted quarterly and then reported annually. And we also talked when we were on a recent site visit, Tamara Traxler and myself, with Milestone staff about continuing inspection of the monitoring wells, and it was understood that biannual inspection should be adequate just to make sure that there aren't any issues with them. Our staff recommendation, what we did here is take the conditions from the 2017 CUP, and only one of them is being modified. But I did want to call out to you that what I observed when I looked at the record on that action, the numbering skipped a number, and it went from condition 4 to condition 6. And we've corrected that with a renumbering here, but if you were to look back at the prior action, you might observe that. We did look carefully to make sure that there wasn't anything errantly omitted when that record was established, and we didn't find anything to that effect. The only condition proposed to be modified of the prior 2017 CUP is what we're now numbering as condition number 5, which that number of which was skipped over in the record from the 2017 CUP. And you can see what we have stricken through as being taken out of that condition, and what's in red would be added. So it would now read, groundwater sampling shall be conducted annually and reported annually until such time as mining of industrial sand restarts, at which time groundwater sampling will be conducted quarterly and reported annually. And the sampling frequency shall be conducted monthly if there's a consistent increase in any of the groundwater testing parameters. And that's the only change, but I'd note that we've kept the rest of the conditions, so now it's 13 conditions. The 2017 CUP had conditions 1 through 14, but it skipped number 5, so we've corrected that. At that, our staff, myself, Kevin, and Tamara are available for any questions you may have prior or after hearing.
Board members, do you have any questions you'd like to ask? Okay, I guess the burden falls on me. I'm looking at the charts of the test results, Mr. Wozniak, and I'm seeing that tests were made in November of 10, April of 12, August of 13, December of 14, May of 16, 9 of 17, 2 of 19, and 6 of 20, and the next one, evidently you have not chosen to put on these charts all of the quarterly test results. You're just selectively put them into the result. I'm looking at packet page 41, for example, and sulfate, the one which seems to have.
We can have the milestone staff address that, Mr. Chair.
You didn't review this yourself?
Well, I did.
Oh, well, of course, you weren't here. Yeah, got it. All right, who'd like to speak in favor then on behalf of Milestone?
I can answer that. My name is Bob Service. I'm a hydrogeologist for Milestone and Matthey. I'm a licensed professional geologist in Wisconsin. The numbers you listed off, Mr. Chairman, are just index numbers along the time scale, the X scale. So they're just indexes. They don't demark each of the individual tests plotted on the chart. So you will see points plotted in between those demarcation index dates that you listed. And that scale is intended to be a continuum time scale. So you'll notice that each of the sample results don't fall on one of those lines. They're in between the lines. And so if we put all the dates for all the samples, I believe
You need a bigger piece of paper.
there'd be 40 of them, I believe. And those wouldn't fit on the page. So That was just the interval that we broke that time access into.
I see. Anything else you want to say?
No, I believe Mr. Wozniak did a nice job presenting our proposal. From a hydrogeologist standpoint, I'm in agreement that there are not any observable exceedances, trends, or detections that I would consider to be attributable to the mining operation. And therefore, due to that fact, as well as the cessation of the mining, sand mining operations, I believe it's reasonable to reduce the sampling frequency from quarterly to annual.
Well, would you take a look at the sulfate chart then and maybe explain to me, and that's on our packet page 41. It's part of exhibit 6.1.B, I think. It's in the bottom right corner of the page. Well, yeah, when you turn the page so that it works for you.
I see the chart, sir.
Okay, and I see that monitoring well number 1, which is blue, has what appears to be a rising trend, at least from the year 10 to the year 20. Do you agree? It ends higher than it started.
If you plotted a line, it would show an upward trend with those data points. What I would point out on this graph is the Y scale, which is valued from 0 up to 20 at the top. I'd like to indicate that the state standard for sulfate, the enforcement standard, is 250.
Okay,
And the preventative action limit is 125. So half of that is the what's called the PAL in the state. And our values are down around 16, and I would suggest that that trend is insignificant at those value ranges at this point in time.
okay. So in reaching your professional opinion that on all of the parameters that were tested, none of them have a significant trend. Is that your conclusion?
That is my conclusion.
Yes.
I believe what we are
But
seeing.
you reached that conclusion that none of them have a significant trend by referring to the state standard, the state minimum standard, maximum standard, the state maximum standard, and saying we're not getting close to the state maximum standard. Therefore, even if a trend is upwards, it could not be a significant trend. Am I right?
In the case of sulfate here, that is an important part of my justification for that conclusion.
How about for chloride, the chart immediately above it?
Chloride, I would say the same thing. The state standard for that is 250 on the enforcement standard and 125 on the preventive action limit as well for that. So you can see on that scale going up to 25, we are well clear of
Of 125.
those standards. And there are sources of each of these parameters in the natural rock formations, and therefore you can have natural fluctuations in these parameters just due to the natural geology and mineral composition of the rock formations that the water is flowing through.
Let me ask you, when you selected from the 40 test results over the 10-year period, the ones that you would put on the charts, did you just take every fifth one or every second one, or did you selectively choose them?
Everyone is shown here. So you will see where we have collected 40 samples, for instance, from wells 1, 2, and 3A. Those were the original 3 wells that had the longest period of sampling. Those should have, I believe, 40 samples, if I'm not mistaken.
I think they do, yeah.
And so you would see 40 points plotted for MW1, 2, and 3A. I believe there are only 30 for the subsequent 3 wells that were put in 2013.
I got it. Makes great sense. Thanks. What about for nitrogen? That's the chart just above, and the dots do seem to scatter. Monitoring well 1 is consistently the highest. That's been talked about earlier. That's, of course, the location, I suppose, closest to houses or wells of houses in the area. What is the actionable standard for nitrogen?
Very good question. Nitrogen, the state enforcement standard is 10 milligrams per liter.
And the place where action is indicated would then be 5, would it?
2.
2. And some of the blue dots are, well, one of them's at 10. All of them are above, most of them are above 5. A couple are below. Am I reading that right?
Yes, sir, that is correct. Nitrates, nitrogen are common in groundwater in this region. Common sources of nitrogen in groundwater include agricultural fertilizers, animal wastes, or septic system effluent. So Dunn County, for instance, did a water quality investigation that was done by the Wisconsin Geological Survey back in 1988. And for Dunn County, that survey looked at a number of different groundwater samples from wells across the county. And for Dunn County, I realize we're not in Dunn County, that study resulted in 9% of wells having nitrogen levels above the state limit of 10. So that gives you a sense of kind of the prevalence of nitrogen in groundwater in this region. And again, it's mostly attributable to agricultural or septic effluent.
Would it be your opinion that no way this mining operation could contribute to nitrate in the wells, in the test wells?
I believe some of the blasting compounds that are used could contain nitrogen as one of their components. So I'm not trying to say that there's no nitrogen containing compounds on site. What I would say, based on this data, especially knowing the locations of the wells where the different values are reached, MW1, for instance, being one of our more up-gradient wells, which would intercept water coming onto our site rather than groundwater leaving our site that has encountered our operation. That indicates to me that this is an off-site source of nitrogen, likely due to typical sources that I mentioned.
It's your belief that the water being monitored in these deep wells, with the exception of 3A, I suppose, all the other wells, is it your belief that the water, that where that water is being sampled, the direction of water flow is always is primarily from northwest to southeast?
That is correct. The pretty much uniformly across the site, from north to south to east to west, the gradient or direction of groundwater flows pretty uniformly to the southeast.
How do you know that?
That's based on the water levels that we have in the well network. So we can look at those wells, we can plot their elevations on a map, and then we can contour the groundwater table between those points, and that shows us the shape of the water table. And hydrogeologists have been able to determine that groundwater will typically flow from areas of high elevation to low elevation on the water table, and it will flow in a direction that's perpendicular or at right angles to those groundwater contour lines that can be contoured based on our points.
And you did that for this, or your knowledge of the water levels in the monitoring wells includes knowing that the northwestern wells have higher levels of water in their aquifer than the southeastern ones.
That is correct.
Excellent, excellent. Let me address your attention to the temperature chart now. You know, some of our concerns naturally in this mine relate to the nearby stream, and I can't remember the name of it now.
Wilson Creek.
Yeah, great, thank you, Wilson Creek. Because it's borderline trout habitat, I guess, and temperature is very important for trout in our part of the country. I see that if the chart on packet page 42 in the bottom left corner, the temperature chart it's apparently in degrees Fahrenheit, and it indicates that the temperature in the wells scatters between 40 and 60, roughly, degrees Fahrenheit. Am I drawing the right conclusion from that chart
That's correct.
so far? Yeah. That one, well, to an untrained eye like mine, it looks like it's scattered. Do you see any trend there in any of the monitoring wells to indicate that there's a warming trend?
No, sir. One comment I would make is it's hard to determine that there's a seasonal trend at work here. Groundwater temperatures, especially these shallower wells, will fluctuate seasonally. And we're sampling quarterly, so that's why it looks like a scattered kind of with time display. If this was more of a continuous measurement plotted, again, you'd need a larger piece of paper, but you would see seasonal trends at work here.
How deep is the water being, I don't remember, I'm sure it was in the data, but how deep are these, is the aquifer that these wells are sampling?
It's different for the different wells. For instance, the water table's pretty close to the surface at the 3 nest that we had up on the photo on the screen here. That 3 nest is down by the river, and at that location you've got groundwater that's close to the surface. At the up gradient wells, MW5 is probably our deepest well to groundwater. And
Oh, there, I see, it's printed right on this map.
okay, if
Yeah.
that tells you the
Tells the elevation of the ground, well, no, I guess it's the elevation of the surface, I'm sorry, I misspoke. What does TOC mean?
top of casing is what that stands for.
Okay. No, I guess it's not there.
I could help you if I can just grab a piece of paper here.
Sure, you're not chained from moving around. So I guess if there are seasonal variations in the temperature of the groundwater measured in this, in the aquifers that these wells are measuring, then certainly the operations of the mine could be having an effect on the temperature. If things like rain and snow melt can affect the temperature being monitored, surely activities in the below the ground level in the mine could also affect the water, couldn't it? The water temperature.
The key thing to that question is groundwater travel times between the mine operation and the creek of interest. So we've established that groundwater flow velocities in the area are maybe on the order of 69 feet per year. So that amount of residence time in the groundwater flow system in the subsurface rock formations is expected to allow that groundwater temperature to return to background groundwater temperatures.
What would you expect background groundwater temperatures to be at the depth where these wells are sampling?
Typical rule of thumb for groundwater temperatures is mean annual temperature,
Okay,
mean annual air temperature.
oh, of the air above the ground at that point?
Correct.
I was thinking it was about 45 degrees. I think when I visited Crystal Cave, I might have heard that or something, which is a really flimsy thing to base knowledge on, but.
Sure. Well, I would direct, we've got the data on that question right here.
Great.
And it's in the temperature plot. So my argument would be the average of those points plotted at each well location. That would be the average.
You're saying that would be the mean background temperature even if there were no mine there?
Yes, sir.
But we don't have data here from which we could conclude that. You're drawing that conclusion from something else.
I don't see a mechanism for the mine to be affecting groundwater temperatures.
Don't you think, well, we know there's infiltration of water from directly above the mining site into the
Okay.
groundwater. Surely the sun shining on open water would raise the temperature, wouldn't it?
Sure. I do see your argument, changing land surface, land uses could have an impact on the temperature of water infiltrating into the ground.
Yeah, but you don't see anything else because your mining equipment is not hot at the point of impact with the sand, for instance, as it's scooping it out. You're using a scooping type of operation, aren't you, rather than a dredging operation to pull up the sand? When you do it? You do both? Okay, I don't think I have any more questions for this witness. How about you, other board members?
I got a couple questions for Candy when she's ready.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Service.
Chair and board members, I just wanted to mention, I think I had overlooked calling out that this mine is subject to renewal next year, so that would be a obvious point to revisit any issues there may be, or should anything have changed with the markets for industrial sand mining. I'm sure we would be made aware either prior to or at that time.
Was there anything else from the staff? Did you intend to have Kevin testify or Tammy testify?
I think that they're available for any questions, if there are anything that they can best handle from the staff end, because they've had a little longer duration dealing with the property than I have.
Yeah. I'd like to hear from Ms. Traxler next, if that's okay with you, and then we'll certainly get to you, Mrs. Anderson. Could you step up and answer some questions, Ms. Traxler?
I'm not gonna bring anything with, but
That's right.
I'll try.
We'll see what we have.
Those tables can be pulled up on the screen if we need to.
Okay.
Just continue down to the presentation. I think the application should be there.
You've been in the room, so you heard the dialogue between me and Mr. Service, I presume. Were you able to make out the words as I spoke through a filter and he spoke through a filter?
I did.
Okay, thanks. Do you agree with what he said? Is there anything with which you disagree?
No, I agree. I think the important thing to, and I was trying to think of how we captured this at one point. Before they even started monitoring groundwater, they had the 3 wells that were installed, which helped establish that background water quality. And really for how much they've been monitoring over the last 9 years, there was just a very small window that they've actually been operating. So I would almost argue that the monitoring that's going on now is kind of almost established an ongoing background, water quality. When I was reviewing this, I almost had thought, well, let's cease monitoring of these wells. And the downside of that is if they wanted to get going again, we have lost that window of background water quality. So by at least maintaining and keeping these wells open over the non-operation years, I would argue we're continually to establish background water quality. Again, because there's just a narrow window that they actually operated and we're mining into groundwater.
As I recall, you are a geologist also, aren't you?
Correct.
Yeah. I don't think I have any other questions. How about the rest of you? For Tammy? No? Thank you. Please stand by in case something really exciting comes up. Could I ask Mr. Graybaugh a question?
Good morning.
Good morning. You're Kevin Graybaugh, right?
I am.
Former zoning administrator.
Yep.
Yep.
Now land use conservation specialist.
And you've been working in this field here for St. Croix County for how many years?
Well, I worked for St. Croix County since June of 1999.
Yeah. And so you participated in some way in all of the mining permitting, conditional uses, and renewals that we've done since the county started doing that, haven't you?
I've been involved since about 2007 when I was offered the zoning administrator job.
Yeah.
Before that, I was doing other duties.
Does the county have any other operations that mine into groundwater?
Nope, this is the only one.
The zoning ordinance as it pertains to non-metallic mining normally requires a 5-foot buffer between the mining, the extraction going on and the water table, if I remember right. Is that correct?
More specifically, what it talks about is there's a 5-foot separation between the bottom of settling pond or washing pond and
groundwater. Yeah.
It doesn't really specifically address mining to stay 5 feet above.
But the net effect of that is that in this county, we don't have any other non-metallic mining operations that are working into the groundwater.
That is correct.
That don't have a buffering zone in them.
Yes.
So that's why we have all this fancy, for want of a better term, these monitoring wells around the perimeter, and we have all these reports being gathered, right?
Yes.
If the other mines are operating what is deemed to be safely above the groundwater, and so they aren't required generally to have monitoring wells.
That's correct.
Yeah. So from the beginning, we've tried to get this one right, and it becomes, in a sense, our test situation for any future applications that might be made into groundwater. Any questions you folks have?
Kevin, you said that if a mine has got a settling pond, they've got that 5-foot requirement. What if a mining operation does not have a settling pond? What's the requirements then for getting into the groundwater?
You just have to stay above the groundwater.
Very good.
Okay.
I have some questions for anybody that can answer them. I realize they want to reduce the testing because either it's expensive or it's a nuisance. And I know ground testing has been around a long time. How do they do that?
How are the tests conducted?
Yeah.
Well, maybe this would be a good time to call on the applicant then. So, Mrs. Anderson, why don't you give whatever presentation you think is appropriate and see if you can address Mr. Nickham's question as you go.
Thank you. I'm also going to possibly invite Tony Tomaszek, Vice President, up here with me to help answer any questions that might be asked. Regarding the sampling, we hire a third-party consultant that goes out every quarter and conducts the sampling. What they have to do is take the top off of the well, and then they bail out samples, collect them on site, and then they're sent to the laboratory for all the tests that are required for our permit. So they go out, they notify us when they're going, and we let them go out and do it. And that's, the ones in the winter time are a little more challenging for them because these wells are around the perimeter. So access is sometimes an issue, but they get it done.
How do they actually, they drop a hose down in or something and suck some water out?
Well, kind of. It's a baler. So I haven't done this since I was in college in River Falls, and that was in 1995. So it may have gotten more sophisticated since then, but yeah, they have to drop, it's like a tube on a rope. It's more sophisticated than that, but they drop it down, and then they got to pull it all the way up by hand to get the water sample. And then they may have to do it several times in order to get as much water as they need for all the different samples that we have to be run. So it's just mainly dropping a tube down the well, pulling up the water.
And then I also have a couple more questions. I realize you don't know this for sure, but roughly, when will they start taking sand out of there again?
Would you like to answer that one, Tony? I'm going to ask Tony Tomaszek to answer that one. Thank you.
Are you wondering when you should buy stock in the company, Mr.?
Well, I'm thinking if they're gonna start mining sand out of there next year, I question what we're,
Tony Tomaszek, Vice President, Matthew Construction, Onalaska. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I think I've been here before. Our current plan for the mine is we're going to continue operating with St. Croix County Highway on the limestone on top, which was mentioned before. I really don't see the frac sand mining coming back anytime soon. I would say 5 years or more, if it even comes back at that point, at this particular mine. I would think we'd have to see oil prices up near $100 a barrel, which nobody wants to see at any time soon. So I really don't anticipate that we'll be mining frac sand there in the very near future, if at all again. In fact, I've met with the St. Croix County Economic Development Council here to see if there's other, like industries that might lease this property from us. We've actually removed all of the industrial sand equipment off of the property, so we can't even process sand there if we wanted to. So I don't see us mining sand there anytime soon.
and then also it was mentioned about nitrates and blasting. Couple things. Is there still rock in there that they can mine out of there? I know they've been taking a lot of lime rock out of there over the years. I wonder if there's still rock there. Secondly, do they have to blast to get the sand?
Yes, we have to blast for both the limestone that the county highway uses and the sand we blast. We use different products. We use Anful or a dry product up in the top when we blast for the county, and then we use an emulsion product which encapsulates the nitrate when we blast into the sand. Hopefully, if everything goes right, 99.9% of that blasting agent is consumed in the blast detonation. Yes, there could be some trace residue of nitrate that gets into the water, but it's minimal at best.
Oh, this sand, is it sand rock? Is that sandstone? Is that what it is?
It's bedrock, and Tammy and Bob could answer that better. But yeah, it's actually bedrock sand.
And then is there still crushed rock they can take out of there also? Lime rock?
Above the sand, that's correct, yep. The other comment I would like to offer, and Chairman Malik, you remember, and other members of the board remember, that we had Dr. Tinker from the retired professor from Eau Claire do an extensive groundwater study when we got into this program. The main concern, obviously, at the time was Wilson Creek, as you mentioned, Chairman Malik, the trout stream. I believe with our 9 years of monitoring, we've concluded that the conclusion Dr. Tinker has is that the mining operation would have little or no effect on Wilson Creek. And I believe that's what we've accomplished with all of our mining, to prove that the mining has little or no effect on Wilson Creek and/or the groundwater. Obviously, the nitrates from the agricultural fields and things to the north of the quarry probably contribute more to the nitrates coming in than anything to do with our mining. So I think we've concluded that the mining has a little or no effect on the groundwater, specifically Wilson Creek.
Now, the last time, there was some concern about the creek, because people were here that were concerned about the washing or the creek changing or something. I can't remember exactly how it went, but apparently that's not a problem.
Right, and we also do monitor the creek along with the monitoring of the monitoring wells. So we're taking readings in the creek at the same time and monitoring that groundwater flow of the creek.
But it's not a problem because you haven't been mining there, right?
The mining has been sporadic at best since 2014, and obviously we're seasonal as well. So yeah, it's been hit and miss mining, and like Tammy referred to, we really haven't mined a great deal in there, relatively speaking.
And then you mentioned St. Croix County Highway Department. Did they haul rock out of there?
Yeah, we have an agreement with them that they have a site on a couple acres on site where they stockpile base course, and they crush rock for the county's use.
It's closer to the entrance of the site off the access road.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Anderson, is there anything else you want to say?
Joe, did you have a couple questions for me?
No, Dave beat me to it.
Okay. If no one has any more questions, I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Anybody else in the room that wants to speak in favor of this application? Is there anybody who wants to speak against it? Or ask any question or add any comment? No hands going up. I seem to recognize everybody in the room, and they've already spoken in one form or another, it seems like. Board members, do you have any more questions? Otherwise, I'm getting pretty close to the idea of closing the hearing and moving to the decision. How about it? Somebody got-
Yeah,
You'd like to have the mic on, I bet, Carmen, yeah.
I do have one.
Let me say it again. No one spoke up indicating they wanted to speak against this application. No one spoke up wanting to speak neutrally about it or offer comments. And I invited board members to ask any further questions they might have, threatening to close the hearing soon. Over to you, Mr. Nickum.
I guess is this about money? You're trying to save money? Is that?
Am I trying to save money, or are you saying? Who are you? I mean, how does that affect your decision?
I'm asking the applicant.
Aren't we all in favor of our businesses succeeding and making money so they can employ people and pay
I guess
taxes?
my point is, why do you want this? Why do you want this reduced?
For a number of reasons. Money is one of them. It costs almost $4,000 per sampling event. But before we considered coming to ask, we wanted to see if the quarterly sampling was providing any trends or any data that would show that there was that we were causing any problems or if there were any problems out there. So the first thing we did was to analyze the data. The other reason, the sand market crashed and we haven't been mining any sand out there, which was the reason for the wells. So we wanted to reduce it from quarterly to annual because we still feel that the wells are useful in providing background data. That way, if we ever do decide we want to do it again, we still have that background data. The county is still going to receive the annual reports that we provide every year, but instead of 4 sampling events, it will be 1. Does that make sense?
So really, you feel this excessive testing is totally unnecessary at this point?
I do. Unless the sand market were to pick up again, then I would fully support going right back to quarterly. It's a good protection for everyone.
That triggers a question for me. How soon after the testing are the results available to be furnished to the county? When will you send in the annual reports?
The annual report is due, we usually send it in mid to the end of January of the following year. So the reports are due in February, but I like to get them done sooner than later. So the annual reports are sent in January because our last quarterly samples are usually in December. And it depends on access and snow cover, how quick they can get out there in the fourth quarter to do them. So we send them in January of the following year. We also include the results of our stormwater inspections. And we also will, if approved, we'll start including the results of our biannual visual inspections of the wells as well.
So is it a safe conclusion for a layman like me that the test results will be available to the county no later than the end of March of the year following when they were taken?
Yeah, in fact, I think we already have a due date on our existing permit.
Oh,
I can't remember, let me grab it.
okay. It just occurred to me that maybe we ought to say something about due dates, but if we've already done it,
I
then
think
we're
there's
all set.
already,
Or if you've established a pattern, if we would fall out of the pattern, then the staff could.
paperwork all organized when I got here.
Well,
Okay. Oh, yes. The annual report is due by February 28th of each year. So the following year.
excellent. So there's never a lag of more than a couple months from the last test.
Correct.
Great. I have no further questions. How about the rest of you? No? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
coherent presentation. Gives me a chance to learn something about hydrogeology, which I greatly appreciate. Not that I have any use for it, except in this context, but hey, if you guys want to hire out as speakers about hydrogeology, you know a little something now. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to declare this hearing closed. We will not take further evidence for it then. We'll make our decision based on the evidence that we have. And so, members, the proposal is that we would reduce the requirement from quarterly testing to annual testing for the duration of this permit, which will be up for renewal sometime next year. Anybody have concerns, or are you liking the staff recommendation enough to consider adopting it without change? Floor is open.
I'll make a motion, we accept the staff recommendations without changes.
Second.
Any discussion on that motion to accept the staff recommendation and make it our own decision? Any discussion at all, members? I'll ask for your vote then. All in favor, vote aye.
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 All opposed, vote nay. The decision is unanimous to adopt the staff recommendation and reduce the reporting requirement to annual. Let's see, other business. Date of next meeting is October 22. Announcements and correspondence. Oh, jeepers. I hope I had my mic off. I need a personal assistant to turn that thing on and off. That'd be the vice chair, and he's unmasked, but then I'm masked, so. From the zoning staff, any thing about the October meeting that you want us to know?
At this point,
You have a personal
I made an
assistant.
assistant for the microphone as well.
Yeah,
We have one item related to the Meister's Bar and Restaurant Grill up at Cedar Lake, asking for a variance, for a setback variance from the ordinary high water mark to expand a deck or build a deck.
okay.
So that's all we have for that agenda.
And has the deadline passed for the October agenda now, or the?
Yes.
Yeah. So that'll be the one we will have then, unless they should withdraw it or something like that. Otherwise,
Correct.
it'll go forward. Okay, anything else from the staff for the good of the order? Nope, nothing else, huh? We concluded that there was no practical way to reduce the volume of paper that we have to read for some of the really huge applications, didn't we, Ellen?
Chairman Malik, when you requested that last year in November, I did draft some, as the board requested, I did draft some proposed changes to your bylaws. Those have been submitted to Corp Counsel for review. He was reviewing them, and then we had COVID-19. Well, first of all, you guys didn't have meetings. We canceled several of them. And then COVID hit, and we had a pandemic and a quarantine. We didn't have meetings again. That drafted language is still available for your review, but I was waiting for Corp Counsel. And I did remind him when we first came back from the quarantine. He wasn't able to get to it. I have not reminded him the last 2 months. So,
Well,
if you'd like me to pursue that,
why
I
don't
will.
you? Let's see if we, since we have only one matter in October, it might be an appropriate month. I think I speak for us all that the burden of reading those really long applications, and especially when you do it at home on your computer or whatever, and you can get screen fatigue that's really almost deadly. And I think that's an impediment to recruiting board members, quite frankly. That's one of the worst parts of the job, is reading through a huge file. Now that we, because of COVID, can't make our inspection trips in a van together, we also have the burden of going out alone, finding the place, going to the place, having to deal with the potential that you'll meet with somebody there, and the situation might be fraught, as people want to tell you things and you have to tell them, no, I may not listen to you. Here, read this sign, etc. It hasn't made our job any easier. So if there were a way that's still fair to all, that we could reduce the amount of paperwork, that would be desirable. That's all that's behind that.
Okay, we'll definitely put it on next month's agenda. As I said, it's already drafted. Just need Corp Counsel to review it. Also, you had requested looking into possible training opportunities, and most of our opportunities Julie was able to research didn't quite work out. But there is training that has now become available online. And so again, I believe we just got this past week another notice about some new online training coming out of Stevens Point. So we'll forward that to you. And as always, we'd offer to pay any fees, although I don't believe there's any fees with this particular go-around. It's free. So you could attend from your own home. So,
we probably wouldn't be paying per diem to watch from home, but if we scheduled a viewing here on these screens, then per diem would be appropriate. That
we could
might
certainly
help.
do that if that would help to
Might help.
incentivize actually doing the training. I don't think paying per diem would be a egregious thing. I think it would be certainly appropriate. So
Yeah,
if
well-
there's interest under that circumstance, please email Julie and we'll see if we can set that up. It should not be a problem. So,
Okay, good. I mean, it's only
Yeah.
fair. This is
happy,
not
yeah,
a-
happy to pay
Not an easy
that.
job, and
And as to
little
an
paid
additional
maybe.
board member, we are still looking. I will say that it was in August that I heard back from a person who Mr. Malik's recommended, who first said no, then reconsidered, and then finally in August let me know that no, she did not want to be appointed to the board. So we're looking for a new appointee. And do recall, it cannot be anyone from the same places where any of you live.
Can't be from a resident of a city or a village or one of the towns that one of us is in. It has to be from a town that doesn't have a present board member. Yeah.
And generally
So you
speaking,
don't need to bother trying to sweet talk Barb Nelson. She said no.
she said an absolute no the second time in August.
Okay.
And then the final point would be that it certainly can be a town board member, but generally speaking, then if there's ever a situation where they have it's in their community, they have to recuse themselves. And they can't vote, they're out of it completely from day one. So that's something to keep in mind.
All right. With that, it's 9:40 according to that same clock that convened us, and I will declare us adjourned. Thank you all.